Hey, David Brewster here in an episode of Chordplay, and this is ZZ Top, Blues Secrets from Texas, and we're going to be looking at Billy Gibbons again. And I have to admit, the most popular lesson on my channel is the original ZZ Top Chordplay that I put together last year, and it blew past the Van Halen Chordplay, which was the most popular for a while. But earlier this year, I noticed ZZ Top just creeped right past Van Halen, and I thought, man, there's a ton of ZZ Top fans out there watching. So ZZ Top's very essential. You know, they formed in Houston, Texas in 1969, and went on to become one of the most, popular and influential blues-based rock bands of all time. They've sold like 50 million copies of albums, worldwide. Now, I'm a huge ZZ Top fan. I love blues, I love rock, and when you put those two elements together and mix it up, I'm a sucker for it. I just can't help it. And there's just something about Billy Gibbons. He just has this cool, laid-back, very really interesting person. And I've never met Billy. I'd love to meet Billy Gibbons. But for those of you watching that maybe aren't as familiar with their early stuff, I love, 70s ZZ Top. You can't beat it. And there's nothing wrong with the 80s and 90s, and I mean, they're still active today. Actually, I did read that ZZ Top recorded a new album last year, and they're going to be putting that out sometime soon. And Billy Gibbons also recorded another solo album last year, too, so they're still very active and busy. But for those of you that aren't aware, there's an album from 1994, a compilation, One Foot in the Blues, and it has all these blues-based moments in ZZ Top's catalog. And it's kind of cool to find, one album that has all those hits and all those blues-laced, songs. So good. And for those of you that aren't aware, I did have a lesson for Billy Gibbons that was in Guitar Player magazine a couple of years ago. I guess that was the November 2019 issue, Cruise Control. And that's looking at, some of Billy's kind of habits and position shifting, licks and phrases on the fretboard. So if you're a big ZZ Top or Billy Gibbons fan, look up that lesson, just dive in. The music in this lesson comes from early ZZ Top, from the 70s, and I'm not going to repeat anything that was in the original ZZ Top Chordplay, but there is one example that we're going to revisit, and we're going to look at the chords again, but then I wanted to talk a little bit about the lead, too, and how it kind of matches up with the chords in that example. So here we go. With the opening, that was Certified Blues from ZZ Top's first album. And for those of you watching that haven't heard ZZ Top's first album, you have to check that album out. It's brilliant. But Certified Blues is like this. So we're basically flirting with this A power chord, and we're definitely rocking the blues, for this one. But we're doing... So you're kind of hitting this A power chord, and then you're grabbing the C and smearing that into that A note there on the G string. So you're kind of skipping over that D right there. And then a hammer-on pull-off from that open G. And you're kind of moving back down to that A. And then you hear this kind of funky, it's kind of like percussive, like muted strum, and then that hammer on from the open G under that A note there on the second fret. And then the second time, he's really just kind of separating the strings of that A power chord, where it's mimicking that first fill, but he's doing... And then you kind of gallop your way into this E power chord. And then you hear this little blues lick. And that was... And I also hit the tube screamer there just to kind of jump out, for that little fill, because the rhythm part, is a little bit lower. And then when he hits that lick, it does kind of stand out in the mix. Next is Blue Jean Blues from Fandango. This is a very popular, blues-based ZZ Top song. Something like this. Very slow blues, obviously. And then Billy's doing all those little licks. All those cool, really expressive bending licks. I love that little open string. You kind of started with right there. That's so cool. Grabbing that open B. Trill in there. And here I am looking at the licks, and this is chord play. I'm supposed to be looking at chords, but I'm getting distracted with Billy's licks. Anyway, with the chords, you've got that really kind of strange intro, like that. And he's really just kind of climbing up chromatically that F sharp, and then grabbing that C sharp there on the high E. And then you've got the single G to a single A to B minor. Let that ring very slow. But it's really interesting to know it's a blues song using just pure minor chords like that. Really cool. And eventually you're going to hear it move down to that E and E minor right there. And then back to the G, A, B minor. Classic song, and there's definitely tons of cool licks, and there's just something about those really slow, kind of dreamy blues like that. I love those songs. Alright, up next is a pretty obscure ZZ Top song. This is Avalon Highway, and Billy's finger picking, and he's also snapping the strings, during this kind of funky and different riff like this. Really different. So you're literally snapping the D string, kind of pulling it away from the pickups right there. And kind of creating this really clucky and kind of funky, it's almost like chicken picking kind of. And then he's sliding into that partial A7 right there. And then you want to do it again. This really funky C right there, and then it moves to D, and right there you're going to hit that that single D on the top right there once the first time, and then twice the second time, and then go back to A. Really different song, and not really as well known as some other ZZ Top songs, but just a totally left field riff with all those snaps. Up next is Hot Blue and Righteous from the Trey Hombres album, and he's really just kind of picking through the chords in this really slow blues, something like this. starts with E major, and you're actually hammering onto that G sharp right there on the G string, and just kind of pick right through it slowly. And then go to B minor, and you're going to do a similar thing right there with the sus2 to that D note to change it to D minor. And then go down to A right there and pick through that. He's basically hammering on that D note, which is the sus4, you know, for A. And he's also grabbing that F sharp right there on the high E string, which is technically the 6th. So an A6, sus4, A13, sus4, something like that. So right there, the E, and then B minor, and that A thing. Start on A, and that starts the verse. So A major, and then C sharp minor right there. And then you're going to go down to F sharp minor like this. And this is tricky. So it's a little piece of F sharp minor right there. And then your pinky actually is going to grab this G sharp right there, the 9th. And you're kind of doing that kind of thing. Also hammering onto that B note right there with your pinky like that. And that's tricky. It's very demanding because you're holding that bar and then also playing with your pinky like that. And then right there it's going to go back to E, and it starts that whole pattern over again. So the E, Next up is Sure Got Cold After the Rainfall, which is from the Rio Grande Mud album, and we did have this in the original ZZ Top Chordplay, but I wanted to revisit it and talk a little bit about the lead that goes over the top of these chords. So the chord part, the chords are pretty easy. You got A major, and then you've got D over A right there, and then A7 right here, and then go back to that D over A. Kind of walking through it or picking it out like that. Now if I loop that with the digital looper from TC Electronic, I can play the lead over the top of it like this. This really biting, you know, tone and sound. It almost reminds me of like Albert Collins or somebody in the beginning. So he's literally, you know, targeting this F sharp to A right there. And then you hear him grab this C and he bends that up to the sky. And then grabs that A again. So against the backing, it sounds so good and bluesy. You know, that first part, like I said, it's F sharp to A, grabs that C, bends it to the sky, grab that A again, and then you hear this really tasty, and I love how he's setting up and basically targeting that C sharp against the A, and then you hear him target that F sharp right there. Back to the C sharp again. So he's really flirting with that that middle chord because it's A, and then D over A, and then A7. So So we're kind of bookended, you know, between two A chords right there. And I love what he does over that D over A. You know, it sounds so good against those chords. Last examples just got back from Babies, which is also from ZZ Top's first album. And when you hear the song, it has this really kind of traditional sound, but then when you try to play the guitar part, you'll realize there's something really different going on here. So the rhythm part is like this. You can probably see what it is. We're actually moving from C5 to C7. So Billy just bypassed the C6 that you normally see right there. You know, there's no 6 there. He just skipped right to the 7. So as you can see, that causes a big stretch on the fretboard, especially when you go down to this really tricky F. That's a big stretch. So I have a hunch that maybe Billy was tuned to drop D for the rhythm part, which that would actually change this stretchy C to something that looks more like that. And then when you go down to this F, instead of doing it that way, if you're in drop D, that F would actually look more like that. And then the G right there would look more like that too. So I have a hunch, because Billy definitely, you know, would tune to drop D occasionally for certain songs. I have a hunch that's what's going on with this one, because that's a monster stretch. Great blues rock, you know, song from ZZ Top. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with ZZ Top Blues Secrets from Texas. And definitely I'm a huge Billy Gibbons fan, you know, and I've met and talked to so many people that love ZZ Top, love Billy, Dusty, and Frank, I mean the whole band. And there's just something really cool about the fact they've been together since 1969. It's the same three guys. They haven't had any, you know, personnel changes, no tragic deaths or anything like that. It's the same three guys, the little band from Texas. And they've just like dominated the world, you know, as soon as they came out. And there's a lot of blues, there's some funk elements, you know, I hear like R&B, and of course there's like fuzzy, you know, Hendrix influence and all kinds of stuff. So you never really know what they're going to do. I mean, it's usually something blues based, but the fact that they've kind of reinvented themselves and revived, you know, blues music and blues rock music since the late 60s technically, that's really impressive. You know, I'm just completely, you know, in awe of Billy Gibbons. I think he's really one of a kind and a really unique, you know, American musician. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.